Don't look now, but it's a whole new world of weed out there. Pot is flower, it's Bruce Banner and Blue Dream. You've got bongs and dabs, resin and shatter, vaping and edibles, new terms, new strains, and new ways to use cannabis sativa, the plant. Some just made with CBD, and hemp has minimal THC. There's sativa and indica strains, and 100 chemicals, all legal in 10 states for adult use. There's a lot to get to know. Get used to it, folks, because it's legal in the Bay State and it's not going away. Neither is In the Weeds with Jimmy Young next. Revolutionary Clinics is just one of 49 medical cannabis dispensaries in Massachusetts, but there's a reason why it's one of the most popular. It's their patient-first philosophy. All day long, they teach, they educate, they communicate about this complicated plant called cannabis sativa. That's true whether you visit their Cambridge location in Fresh Pond at 110 Fawcett Street or at 67 Broadway in Somerville. Revolutionary Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Hi everyone, welcome to a special live edition of News Dabs and In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. I'm Nicole Spiller, now reporting for the Pro Cannabis Media Group and ProCannabisMedia.com. One of the biggest issues facing the cannabis reform movement is the treatment of PTSD with cannabis. Veterans who return to civilian life have been getting dozens of medications from the VA for treatment of PTSD and other ailments. Many of those medications are opioids, and now that the dangers of those drugs have been exposed, many veterans have turned to cannabis for help. One of those is Stephen Mandile, who is standing by in studio with Dr. Marion McNabb. Hosting our In the Weeds segment, as always, is the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young. Jimmy?
Thank you, Nicole Spiller. Appreciate it. Welcome to the Performer TV studio in Quincy, Massachusetts. I'm Jimmy Young, the host of In the Weeds for this special live edition. And we welcome in two very special guests, Dr. Marion McNabb and Dr. Stephen Mandile. Doctor, congratulations, Dr. Stephen Mandile. Did you know you got an honorary degree from the Pro Cannabis Media Institute?
What an honor.
I knew you'd be happy about that.
I'd like to thank my parents.
The Academy, right?
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know these people, or even myself, Pro Cannabis Media is a Pro Cannabis Media site, and we are dedicated to telling the stories of the cannabis industry through their own words. Two people in studio right now, Dr. Marion McNabb and Stephen Mandile, have been at the forefront of cannabis advocacy in Massachusetts over the last umpteen years. How's that? Is that fair enough? Umpteen? That's one of those.
It's fair.
That's fair?
Yes.
Adding a decade or so.
But Dr. Marion McNabb from the Cannabis Community Care Research Network, we call it C3RN just because it's easier to do it that way, right? And Stephen Mandile is a veteran. He was in Iraq. He got injured. He came back. He went to the VA. They put him on 17 medications. He kicked them all through cannabis. Is that accurate?
After the total of everything after the decade, it was 57 medications.
Oh, excuse me.
It's okay.
Between 1 and 5, you know.
What's 40 medications?
What's 40 medications? Stephen, your story really is compelling, I might add. And I also understand that, are you now a selectman?
Yes, I am.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And it's in Uxbridge, Massachusetts.
Yes, it is.
Which is where Caroline's is.
Yes, home of the first woman-owned dispensary in Massachusetts and home to the first microgrow license in Massachusetts as well.
Very cool. And I've been out to Uxbridge, actually lived in the tiny town of Mendon for a little while.
The tiny town of Mendon,
which is right next to Uxbridge.
Yep.
It's the whole western metro, metropolis out there, I guess. So
yeah, it's a hub.
It is a hub. And Dr. Marion McNabb, can I just call you Marion?
Of course.
Thank goodness. And step in a little closer to your microphone so that we can actually hear you.
There you go.
Appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about your Cannabis Advancement Series. And I understand there's another event coming up August 22nd?
Yes.
On the North Shore.
Yes, and I'm glad you have this here.
Yes.
Really exciting. So the Cannabis Advancement Series is a product of work that Steve came to C3RN in December last year, asking to see if we can look at implementing a research study for veterans and their health and medical cannabis. Out of that, a Cannabis Advancement Series was born, which is our educational series around the data that is collected through this research study. We're on our fourth event now. It's a collaboration between C3RN, Steve, Veterans Alternative Healing, and Joint Venture & Co. and Brum. And so we've all come together as a partnership to run an event series that really tries to bring together leaders in the industry, thought leaders, policymakers, community members, veterans, citizens, scientists, academics, to really engage on how do we bring this industry here to the next level in a thoughtful, professional, and academic way. So we've had 3 events so far this year. Our next one is on August 22nd in Lynn, Massachusetts.
Yes.
Yeah, the
That is
Lynn
my dad's
Museum.
hometown and where my broadcast career began.
Oh, wow.
At WLYN in 1979. It was the first talk show that I ever hosted back then. It was called Sports Call, of all things. What a shock, right?
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, you may even remember the first guest I had. You weren't listening, I know. But do you remember Randy Vataha?
I don't. I was 2 in 1979.
I know, but he played football for the Patriots. He played football
wasn't
for
playing.
Stanford. He used to catch passes from Jim Plunkett. Doesn't matter. Anyway, somebody out there's my age will remember Randy Vataha. That's all I get. And by the way, he's about your size, Marion, by the way. Just saying. No disrespect. Here's the thing about cannabis and what I've learned over the first year of this operation that I've been doing this podcast is science and research is leading this green wave of the movement towards decriminalization, descheduling, and proper respect for the cannabis plant. Right?
I would say there's a room and a growing group of academics and scientists, but I think the people are really leading the way as well. Advocates, community members, not just limited to scientists and researchers. I think scientists and researchers have been limited in the last many decades from what they can study around cannabis and the funding available or the resources or the pathway to be able to research cannabis well. So it's really prohibited a lot of academics from being able to meaningfully study it. Now that it's legal here in Massachusetts, there's a research license category. It's part of everyday life. Now I think we have more of an opportunity. But in terms of those that are really leading the way for decriminalization or fighting for rights, I think over and over we often see it's the advocates who really are pushing change, including my colleague Steve.
Yeah, the research and the data, that's like the sword and the shield for advancement. Like we need those tools to finish the mission. You're going up against the old propaganda and stigma that was put out there, and just people accepted that. Well, these numbers that we're collecting now are the answers to the questions of, well, why isn't it legal? And it's always, we don't have the data, or it's this, or it's that, and without any proof. So now it's like, well, here's the proof, here's some stories, and here's the numbers to back up what we're saying. That's on a much larger scale than you're thinking it is.
Exactly. And I think one of the most important parts of our study that we've been working on is the local nature of it. Just I guess to give the audience a little bit of background, we launched the Veterans Health and Medical Cannabis Research Study together with UMass Dartmouth on March 3rd this year, which was the launch of our Cannabis Advancement Series. It's a study that is fully anonymous, and it's for any U.S. veteran to take, so we don't collect any identifying information, IP address, etc. And what we're doing is asking veterans to share their current medical status, what health conditions they're facing, what their conventional treatments are, if they consume cannabis, either recreationally or medically. You don't have to consume cannabis as a veteran to take the survey. And then if you consume cannabis medically, then we ask for what health conditions they're most helpful for and symptoms. And then we drill down into stigma and education. So around family acceptance, health provider acceptance, and access issues. So I think we really are intending to use this information and this data, anonymous information and data, to really drive change at the local level. And what we find, we're focused on Massachusetts here. Massachusetts veterans are, 3 times more likely to die of an opioid overdose, higher than the national average of veterans and the general population. And there's a suicide epidemic that is of great proportions. So among the veteran population, 22 suicides a day. So what we intend to do with our event series and the Cannabis Advancement Series and our research study is at every event, we're trying to use some of this information to drive policy change at the local level, meaning a city or town or wherever we're at, and trying to understand, within Massachusetts, it's its own commonwealth. There's 351, different cities and towns. So it's a complex place. So anyway, trying to use this data to drive change at those local levels and bring access.
And we're finding one of the great things about this, we're finding that for so many different issues, injuries, disabilities of why they're taking the medicine, how they're taking it, and also which medications that they're able to reduce or stop taking, being able to use cannabis. And just due to side effect reasons, it's just great to be sharing that information with everyone. We're capturing all this data, all this information from the veteran community, but it's really a snapshot of the greater picture of, people, just the United States, with all the different conditions, all the different injuries, mental, physical, both ways. And really coming up with choices, alternatives to, in between, because we were talking about this earlier, you're going from ibuprofen to OxyContin. There's so much room in between there.
There's a big jump right there. I just want to say, right.
It's a huge jump. So how about, you gradually get to that, which was initially created as like an end-of-life pain reliever or any other medication that it replaces. There's always that room. And with our event series, we're able to talk to local, whatever area we're in, and we focus on issues relevant. We did the opioid epidemic in Worcester. We did entrepreneurship in Holyoke. We started off with healthcare across the lifespan of the human being in Boston. And we're just focusing on the things. So it's not for, it's for everyone. We're not leaving out anybody, whether you have been in the cannabis realm for decades or you're thinking about if you want to learn. It's the perfect place to go. We're not stigmatizing. It's just shared knowledge. You're hearing from industry experts, whether it be professional in the business or physicians. So it's all
free.
Around. It's free, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the idea, isn't it, with the VA, to be able to get access to free medication and free health care, supposedly, right, Stephen?
That's the vision. Is this ends up, the VA does what they promised us when we promised to go over to fight these wars and being able to take care of us. So to be able to have the VA supplying veterans with what they need, even if it's cannabis, is what we want to see. But in the meantime, where it's not federally there yet, Massachusetts, we're there. We can do it. We can start now. We can set up something for our state to take care of veterans while the VA figures itself out and things move forward there with the DEA and everything else.
Yeah. And in the world of change down in Washington, D.C., there's so many bills going through the legislature right now, whether it be the States Act or the Safe Banking Act. But to me, one of the easiest things I think everybody should understand is, can't we help our veterans have access to medicinal marijuana? I mean, isn't that
it's low-hanging fruit, like every legislator that can do something will come out looking like they're helping veterans, because it's exactly what they're doing. It doesn't seem like rocket science, but
but you haven't gotten it done yet, right? And same thing with the banking. They're still in the cash economy. Right. It makes absolutely no sense. They're trying, and hopefully later on in this show we do have a guest planned on the phone. And again, this is the first time we've been in this studio, and Lord knows we're learning lots about visual radio and all the challenges. And again, we're talking to Dr. Marion McNabb and Stephen Mandile. So we are going to talk to Morgan Fox, who is the Media Relations Director down at the NCIA, the lobbyist group that's down in D.C. I've never seen people work so hard. I went down there in May, and they're meeting with everybody and taking walks with everybody. I mean, lobbying is just kind of sharing information and leading with science and research just to get this needle moved a little bit and get the respect that the industry has been craving for a while. And everybody, it's really interesting. Everybody kind of agrees that, the time has come to make this, decriminalize this thing, get this off our books and take the people who have been hurt the most by the failed war on drugs, give them a chance to get a hold of the weed pie, is what I call it, the weed pie. Marion, you read, I'm sure you do, all the different research and all the different studies out there. There was one recently that came out about Colorado and use by youth in Colorado. And they're actually finding now that usage by our youth is going down in legal states. Yep. And you guys are smiling because this is kind of like volleyball, where I kind of lay it up for you guys, right? And I didn't mean to hit the microphone. Like I said, it's a new studio. I don't know where anything is. So tell us a little bit about what that study means moving forward.
Yeah, the reason why I'm smiling is that yesterday Steve was aired on PBS Live NewsHour, and that study was the last slide on that video that was aired last night. So I would encourage folks to check out that
Can I go back to that a second? Did they explain why it was the last slide? Just out of curiosity.
They didn't, but if you look at the narrative of their story, you could understand why they wanted. It was a very balanced approach to a lot of science right now in the cannabis industry is right and left wing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very hard to. It's a pendulum swing. So anyway, they were doing a really good job at balancing. Right. And so anyway, that was the last slide. That's why I smiled. I think a lot of things about youth prevention. So I think, right now, at least in the Cannabis Control Commission and in Massachusetts, I feel like the state has a legislative mandate and has done a really good job of designing a public health prevention campaign, approach, messaging system to ensure that young people don't have access to cannabis. Also, that there's appropriate labeling, age restriction requirements. I think, the state here has done a very good job of implementing a public health campaign. So while we see, Colorado youth rates go down, they've implemented approaches that, reduce youth access. I think Massachusetts will do the same. Mm-hmm. And they already have. I mean, we can see great billboards around that are, really promoting like a legal, safe environment here.
Right. Use it responsibly. Again, I keep preaching this on my podcast on a regular basis, that it's an adult use product that is expected to be used responsibly, both recreationally and medicinally.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to remember that, and I believe that you're going to have a colleague and a friend, a pediatrician on this show.
Dr. Eric Ruby is going to be coming.
Dr. Eric Ruby. I think it's really important to remember that, there is a lot of evidence and emerging evidence coming out around pediatric uses of medicinal cannabis. So anything from cancers and autism. There's a lot of science going on in Israel around this as well, a lot of clinical research. So I think it's important to focus on a pediatric population also. So while we want to ensure youth prevention, we need to make sure that that's balanced messaging, that it's not the new dare. It's this is responsible, but it's also a medicine, and be aware that children will need this in school medicinally. And I believe maybe Steve, or maybe Colorado somewhere recently, just one school started to allow pediatric medicinal cannabis use. And I think it's really, really important. I'll be a little provocative because I also think it's important because a lot of our young people take medications that are much stronger and mind altering in some instances than cannabis. And so I think just being aware of a balanced public health approach that ensures prevention while access is an important one.
And this is what I tell parents whenever they ask me, you want to, talk to your kids about all the adult use products that are out there. To me, this is a great excuse, a great time to say, look, this is cannabis, this is alcohol, this is caffeine.
Yep.
Okay, and I had to
normalize it.
Normalize it?
Right.
Well, educate yourself about these products.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And parents always say, "Oh, it's difficult to talk to my kids about sex, drugs, and rock and roll." It really is what it comes down to. And I said, "Well, guess what? You were a kid once. Think about what you were going through when you were being pushed or pressured by your friends to, hey, just try this." And here's my thing that really gets me mad. Okay, a lot of things get me mad. But our youth today, when they do go after alcohol and start experimenting with alcohol, they're drinking to get drunk. They are drinking in excess to the point where you could die by having too much alcohol, especially when it might be the first time your system is dealing with it, right? To me, that is more of a danger than any cannabis drug at any concentrate, at any level. I don't care. Yeah. Right. I mean, this is what bothers me.
Yep, it's the parent's job to talk to your child about it. I mean, if communication is the problem for you, you're going to leave it up to the alternative that they're going to learn about these things through institutions like your school and what their beliefs are, or out on the streets. I mean, I learned a little bit from there, but it's hit or miss when you learn it on the streets. But but just to say that anything that comes without risks is careless. So you go through them all, and then you're like, okay, and cannabis is a form of harm reduction if you're talking about alcohol, if you're talking about these other stimulants for conditions like ADHD, even the stomach issues that some children have. So to say that it's absolute without any negatives from it is careless. But to then put it into those other boxes with everything else, like they complain about it being so bad, but they put the same messaging for the alcohol warnings as they do on the cannabis warnings, and then they complain that it's not bad enough because it doesn't mention psychosis, and it's like alcohol causes psychosis too, and if you don't put it on there, it's this double standard of, well, we don't know what to do with it, so let's just keep it hidden. And it's like, that's not where anything's gonna any progress is gonna be made with it. So
absolutely. And some of the, in our first study that was a predecessor to our veteran study, we also asked this data point in our current veteran study, which I'll look into now. One of the striking findings we found, we launched an open cannabis consumer and patient study, also anonymous, last year, and we asked the question, are you how are you using cannabis within your life?
What is your cannabis history?
Yeah, like how are you using cannabis in your life? And strikingly, we found that many were using cannabis to reduce their use of alcohol, they reduced their use of cigarettes, and actually serving in data form exactly what Steve said as a harm reduction strategy. So that, and strikingly in our study for veterans, 63% of our most recent data release of the veterans who took our study reporting consuming medical cannabis are using it to reduce the use of prescription medication intake. Right. So we all know that addiction and alcoholism, addiction, pills, they're all complex issues. So if we're seeing that cannabis is, serving as a positive substitute or alternative for some of these other harmful substances or unwanted prescription medications, you're reducing, cocktails or the ability to, I just think that there's definitely a need for more inquiry around it. I'm not saying that this is a silver bullet or, anything. It's a tool in the toolkit that I think clinicians and academics and healthcare providers and patients all could benefit from.
And it's proving to be a pathway to a better quality of life, which is the most important thing overall.
Absolutely.
Right. We do have a clip that I'm going to set up a little bit. Guys remember Johnny Carson. Anyway, that is your interview with Dr. Lester Greenspoon.
Oh,
right?
awesome.
Yep.
And it's a great little clip. It's a couple of minutes long because the guy's 90 years old. Now, first of all, tell us who he is and what his reputation is a little bit, guys. And then I'll cue it to our technical director and the guy who's putting this all together, Mike Zodos, and he'll play it. But it's a funny story about his first time use of cannabis with a very interesting personality. So first of all, set up who's Dr. Lester.
Well, I'm going to let Steve do it.
All right. So Dr. Lester Greenspoon is, the godfather, I think, of where cannabis came from to today, and that he was someone that was an academic that was sure that cannabis was bad for us, was positive. There's nothing good about it.
Yeah.
And
He's
then
at Harvard.
Right, at Harvard, and through his family, through his friends, was proven that he was wrong, and is such a great man that he came around to the other side and started working the other side to find the truth, and has helped cannabis move light years ahead. Was one of the early on families needing it for medical uses for a child, and it's just an amazing story. The whole family's just been so helpful. I met his son Peter, Dr. Peter Greenspoon, 3 years back when I first started my recovery, and being able to read Peter's book about his opioid addiction, and he was able to make me feel like I wasn't just someone oddball with addiction, that it was going across every, to say a doctor come out and say that he had a problem with addiction is incredible. So it's just an amazing family, and we'll get right into it. He's awesome.
Let's roll this. Let's roll the clip, Mike, and listen to. He's 90 years old now, right?
Yes.
All right. It was Dr. Marion McNabb's interview with Dr. Lester Greenspoon.
Well, it was Carl Sagan and I were the closest of friends, and it was right up until the day of his death. We were each other's closest friend, but very shortly after I met him, we were invited to his apartment, and he lit up a marijuana cigarette.
A marijuana cigarette.
Here I was, a psychiatrist whose interest was in psychopharmacology, and I was a kind of I wasn't an expert, but I was supposed to know about those things. And I said to him, "Carl, you mustn't do that." "Why not?" He said to me, and I said, "Because it will harm your health." And he took another puff, and he said, "Here, Lester, have one. I can assure you it won't harm your health." And I had the greatest respect for Carl, and I thought, I had to take that seriously. I think he's wrong, but I've got to give him the data to prove it. He's got to see the data.
Yeah.
He has to see the data. So I went to the Conway Library, and I was going to read some things on cannabis, but I became so involved. I found it so interesting. I don't believe there's a publication in Conway Library that touches on cannabis that I didn't read at that time.
Would that be the first systematic literature review on cannabis? Literature?
Well, it may be. I can't make that claim, but it was the first systematic review for me.
Yeah.
And that's how I became interested in this, and I could be reassured that my friend Carl wasn't harming himself.
So that was his first experience with cannabis, and he shared a joint with Carl Sagan. I mean, that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a pretty incredible experience.
Do you know how old he was at that point?
Oh.
He had to be in his 30s, right?
I don't remember the exact age.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for those conversations during those sessions with Lester Grinspoon and Carl Sagan.
Yeah.
Pretty
amazing.
Right,
pretty
interdimensional
amazing.
travel, all that.
Yeah.
Just amazing stuff.
Wow.
But
yeah, Dr. Grinspoon obviously is an academic hero. So he basically, at Harvard, tried to challenge the prohibitionist movement through academic inquiry.
But not just Harvard. It was President Nixon.
And presidential levels. He wrote the first book, Marijuana Reconsidered, several after that, challenged the ivory towers around the value of studying cannabis illegally. It's like I mentioned before, it's very difficult to study cannabis as a researcher, and it's federally illegal. So his sort of leadership in taking that torch to continue to fight for ethical scientific inquiry is just, a model for all, and got to give that up to Sue Sisley too. Right. But it was really, really incredible to be able to meet him, and thank you, Steve, for kind of making that happen. And he, it's just one of the most striking points of that interview for me is a lot of the community around. He never received professorship, which is a really large deal, and he's published, hundreds of publications. So for an academic to not receive your professorship is significant. So a lot in the community over the last couple of years challenged Harvard around, doing that, and he's fought in his own career. But when I asked him about it, he said, I really don't care at this point, because he knows the work that he did made an impact on the community and really fought for legalization. And it was so powerful to hear it from his own mouth. And like academics, they can have egos, and it was just an incredible moment.
Yep. Yeah. I've been fortunate where I've had the opportunity to meet Dr. Grinspoon. I've also had the opportunity to meet the late Dennis Perone in San Francisco. Met Marvin Gilmore also in Boston. So I'm learning from all these leaders, the pioneers that were doing it back when, veterans were getting spit on, all this stuff, and they fought and they never gave up. And that was like that's the main thing I've learned from them, and I want to share all of my experiences with these opportunities with other people that I work with, because it really drives you to see, like, these people, you started off on a task that everyone told you wasn't possible, but they never gave up. They had doors slammed in their face, they locked up, thrown in jail, still never gave up. So it's just that idea that you have to keep going, and that's where we are with our series. And the cannabis, it's called Cannabis Advancement. We want to advance everything forward, keep it going, and our focus to be able to do things for veterans is to show that it can be done. If you really want to do something, send in the door kickers first, and that's what we are. So, but what we need from the community at large, society, is for, if you really want to help a veteran, it takes a little more than a thank you. It takes more than, doing push-ups and stuff like that. We need the action of the people. It's proven time and time again that it's the people that when they speak, legislators listen. So we need more action. We need more than thanks. Coming and calling your legislators, coming to these events, sharing your stories, opening up with people, and really activating your government to do its job and to say, we've had enough of this. 20 to 22 a day. We're not going to stand for that, especially when there's something in the toolbox, like you're saying, that we can pull up and help now. Will it be the end all, the magic bullet? No. But again, it's harm reduction. It's allowing veterans to have a family life again. It's allowing families to move forward. It's allowing them to work. Just recently, last month, a veteran was denied a home loan, his VA home loan, because he was a manager at a dispensary. They changed that this week. It's changed that change that can no longer keep you from getting a loan.
Wow.
That's great.
Right?
That's progress.
Right.
We can give a big round of applause for that, too.
Yep.
Now, if we can get the employers to not fire employees for using cannabis on their own time and not affecting their job performance, we'll really have made progress.
2 years ago, I wrote a policy paper about that to support workers' rights around that, both if you're a medical card holder or not. So
look,
I could read.
It sounds something like what you would read from another country.
Right.
Yeah.
Where people don't have rights. It's like, no, your job gets to tell you what medicine you can and cannot take.
Yeah, it's not fair.
It doesn't sound like America, but here we are.
Well, yes. Well, let's get it. We can certainly be talking about that as well. Guys, look, I firstly want to thank you for coming in today. You're friends, good friends, getting closer and closer. This is a historic time. We're all in it together. You guys know I'm dedicated to keep telling the stories of people like Stephen and you, Marion, everything that you've done for this cause. I'm going to continue to wave the flag. I don't care if 1 million people find out about it or 1 or 2, right? Because at some point, we are going to reach that new normal. It's just going to be another business. Yep. It's just going to be another adult use product, right? I hope we all live to see that day. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're all co-creating it, and trying to do that.
I want to get one last plug in for your Cannabis Advancement Series and where they can find out more information about it.
Thank you. Yeah, cannabisadvancementseries.org. You can find out about our next event. It's on August 22nd in Lynn, Massachusetts. It'll be around cannabis cultivation, extraction best practices. It'll be a really cool event, more like a mixer networking event where we're going to invite some key experts in cultivation, extraction, ancillary businesses in the cannabis industry, so everything from like insurance to HR, media, so we hope you'll be there, marketing, etc. We'll have 3 breakout rooms where interested B2B, business to business, business to consumer, just anybody generally interested in the industry can come and have access to ask questions to different experts in 3 different areas. Again, free event. We have to give a big shout out to media at Joint Venture and Co. JVCO.com.
That's right. And I see Dr. Eric Ruby's here and Beth Dost here.
So thank you very much for having us
on. As always, guys, and I so appreciate you coming out on a nighttime, prime time, and we're just going to keep it going.
Yep. Awesome. Quickly, thank you, Jimmy Young. Thank you, Pro Cannabis Media.
Yes,
thank you, Performer.com, for making veterans a focus you have. And lastly, a shameless plug. I love you, Olivia. I love you, Abby. Love you, Jessica, and my family. So that's doing my job.
Those are the right people.
Plug to the family, right?
All right, we're going to continue on with more guests here from the Performer Radio and TV studios in Quincy. After a break, don't go away.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. Why? Because we're a media company that is pro cannabis.
Because those stories are not being told.
We are live streaming from events.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the live stream from the New England Cannabis Convention.
We are blogging on all topics. We are partners with Leafly,
Weed Maps, Green Flower, MJ Headline News, Sensi Magazine, and The Weed Tube. We are Weekly News Dabs with Jimmy Young. Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of News Dabs with Jimmy Young, now reporting for the Pro Cannabis Media Group and ProCannabisMedia.com.
From New Orleans, Liz Dameron, Pro Cannabis Media Network.
We are listing cannabis-friendly events. We are interviewing cannabis experts on the podcast In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. You were one of the co-authors of Question 4, which paved the way. First of all, how did you get picked for that honor, if you will?
We write laws, regulations, we advocate for them, and then we get licenses and we keep them compliant.
We are The Cannamom Show with Joyce Gerber.
A different way of understanding how cannabis impacts your body, which is very different from alcohol, which I think that's the big message that has to get out.
And also much less harmful.
Yeah, much less harmful.
We are a digital media company for the cannabis industry, telling their stories in their words.
There's nothing like having patients come back and say, I feel better.
I am confident that Congress is, at the very least in this current Congress, by next year, going to make it legal make it clearly legal for banks to take marijuana accounts, which is a big step forward.
I also teach cannabis law at my alma mater, Suffolk Law.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
She's just getting started. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. My goodness, this is crazy.
So then combining my background with chemistry and in microbiology, I really wanted to bring that data-informed science into my cannabis practice, and I started working actually at a few dispensaries in Massachusetts.
It's a whole new world of weed out there. I never thought I'd see the Red Sox win a World Series, let alone 3.
Yeah.
Okay? I never thought I'd see the Patriots win a Super Bowl, let alone 5. This is tape. Okay. We are ProCannabisMedia.com. Subscribe today.
Welcome back to a special live edition of News Dabs and In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. I'm Nicole Spiller. Another issue that is facing the cannabis industry is what to do with all those chemicals that this cannabis plant produces. The two main chemicals in the cannabis plant are THC and CBD. The latter, CBD, is a non-intoxicating chemical with anti-inflammatory benefits. What to do about CBD has been a topic of conversation on the federal and state level. In the Weeds host, Jimmy Young, is standing by in studio with a few more special guests. Jimmy?
Thank you very much, Nicole. Appreciate it. And we are now continuing on with a special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young from the studios of the Performer TV in Quincy, Massachusetts. We are joined by Dr. Eric Ruby and Elizabeth Dost, Beth Dost, right?
It is.
And it's a repeat. You were actually on In the Weeds way back when we first started about a year ago, and I appreciate you coming back on tonight too.
My pleasure.
Great to see you again. Dr. Eric Ruby, you have been, your reputation precedes you, sir. You are a pediatrician in Taunton, Massachusetts, and you've been at one of the forefronts of the debate on the medicinal uses of cannabis for various young people's symptoms, and I don't want to call them diseases, but conditions, correct?
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit of your personal story? Because I find that very compelling.
When my son was injured, he was hit by a car in the year 2000. He received a spinal cord injury, and he had central neuropathic pain. Well-meaning physicians tried to take some of that pain away, but the opioids was not a good story. And he was very depressed about his situation, physically, mentally, emotionally. And he found cannabis, and he was able to wean himself off of all his opioids, and his central neuropathic pain is still there, but it is significantly helped.
Can I ask when this was, and how did he get his cannabis?
This was November 29th, 2000.
Okay. So I now know where he got his cannabis, which was pretty much from what they call now the illegal market. I guess it was illegal. Everything was illegal back in 2000, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So he really didn't have an idea of where it came from or what the strain was. He just knew it had a positive effect on him.
Yes, my discussion with him was, if you continue like this, you're going to end up in jail, and you cannot do this because it's going to ruin my reputation. If you need to use it as a medication, you're going to have to go out to Colorado or California, where it's much more accepted. And he did.
And he did.
And he did.
And how did that work? I mean,
well, his mother almost killed me.
Okay.
And as a paraplegic in a wheelchair, knowing nothing about Colorado, he actually was able to buy a grow facility. And after 3 years, he discovered what he needed to take in order to alleviate his problems. He moved his entire team to Connecticut, where he established TheraPlant, which was the first licensed grow facility in Connecticut. It is doing extremely well. Connecticut is still all medicinal. He gives talks, he gives lectures, he educates the population. He's expanded from 60,000 square feet of grow facility to 80,000 square feet. So
wow.
He's doing quite well. He's married, has children, has a wonderful home.
That's incredible.
Has a nicer car than I have.
That's incredible. And I can imagine the challenges between you and your wife to just try to balance everything.
Well, it definitely was. He was very severely injured. It was a year of rehabilitation in New York. He went to the same place that Christopher Reeve was rehabilitated in the Burke Hospital in White Plains. But the challenges emotionally, physically, financially for a spinal cord injured person that's how I got involved in the spinal cord injured community. And I'm head of Massachusetts Walks Again. We have an event at the State House every year, Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Day, which will be September 18th this year. And we've raised $2.5 million this year for grants to cure spinal cord injury.
I'm going out on a limb thinking you probably know who Travis Roy is.
Good friend of mine.
So he's an old friend of mine.
Okay.
And I was there that night.
Wow.
And I know Lee, the dad, because I worked in Portland, Maine for 11 years. And I remember when he was a stick boy for the Maine Mariners.
Well, if the viewers have not read 11 Seconds, they need to.
Yes, it's a great book.
Absolutely.
E.M. Swift. Isn't that the writer, Ed Swift?
I don't know who
No. I'm 100% sure on that one. Was a writer for Sports Illustrated, and 11 Seconds is a great read.
Travis is very modest, but Travis is a very good person.
Yes,
he does lots for the spinal cord injury.
Well, the next time you see him, please tell him that you hung out with Jimmy Young for a little while and watch his eyes light up too. Because he used to come on the sports talk show for kids that I won an Emmy for back in the day on NECN. So I hate talking about myself, but in this particular case, I enjoyed it because I love Travis Roy too. Beth, tell me what you're up to now these days, because when we last talked, you were involved as a clinical science officer. I know you're a registered nurse and a senior healthcare executive. Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing.
Well, so I'm continuing to function in my role as the clinical director for the Massachusetts Patients Advocacy Alliance. And so that's a continuation of making sure that patient rights are protected in the state of Massachusetts. Because as you know, of course, the program was built on the patients. And so that continues to be a fight. It continues to be a fight. And we continue to forge ahead. And the legal initiative has not deterred the patients because of all the marginalized. It is the patients that are the most marginalized and the ones that suffer. So I really have taken on suffering as being one of my key components to my message. I do quite a bit of public speaking. On suffering, and I'm working with a couple of startups that. One is a wellness company, and then the other one is actually called the Weejits. It's a filtration device for smoking flower. So they're launching pretty much this week, and so it's just better ways to consume that are cleaner, healthier, and better for patients.
Yeah.
And anyone else that decides to. I go on and I speak about cannabis as being a health and wellness enhancement element. and just like a daily vitamin. And when Raphael Mechoulam said that it should be as available as aspirin, at first I thought, I don't get this, because it was not my culture. But then now, about 8-9 years later, I think it should be as available as aspirin.
Yeah, and you know what? We're starting to break down the stigma and the barriers that are out there. I've had a medical card in Massachusetts since the inception of the program. I have chronic pain. I've had 4 surgeries in 20 years, and I hate to show my fingers to the camera, but they're kind of gross, and that kind of explains some things to people. It's all I had to show Dr. Bob Walker when I needed my card. I go, do I really need to explain what's going on here? And it's osteoarthritis. That being said, one of the first things I wanted to do was not smoke it anymore. Right, and that was the first questions I had with the patient advocates. I don't like to use the other term of the tender when I went into a specific medical dispensary, and they said, well, why don't you try a tincture? Why don't you try a pill? Or why don't you try an edible? And I said, edibles, well, I've never had any effect of edibles, over the years, or whether they be hash brownies or whatever they were, never had any effect on me. And then he gave me the chunk of chocolate, and it was too much, to be honest with you guys. The dosing and the titration, and because every body is different, it is a medicine. How do we manage that? And I think the answer, you tell me, is different, but every human is different. It's going to affect everybody different. It's almost like you have to be a guinea pig for yourself.
Hey, this is what Beth and I were talking about prior to coming on here. The Cannabis Control Commission has to make sure the dispensaries label what people are getting. The milligrams per dose and the percent CBD, percent THC. Right now, the Department of Public Health regulations say that it all has to be on the bottle. That's really crazy. What needs to be on the bottle is what's in the bottle. And if you want to read the blurb about all the other things, that's what you do at the pharmacy. You go to the pharmacy, you get your penicillin, 500 milligrams per capsule, or you get your amoxicillin, 250 milligrams per 5 cc's. It has to be labeled, it has to be accurate. And right now, there is so much data on what you're getting at the dispensary, you don't know what you're taking. And the reason that we need the data is exactly what you just said. Everybody reacts differently. So we need to do studies. And you can't do studies without the data. And right now, we've been kind of futzing around for 4 years without the correct information. The bottles don't tell you what the volume is. The people don't know what they're taking. It is a combination of CBD, THC, what the percentages are, and what the milligrams are. And without that information, we won't be able to answer your question.
Right. And again, as a pediatrician, you certainly understand the importance of dosing for different ailments. People come to you and looking for answers, and you don't want to give them too much medication. That's a danger. And everyone's endocannabinoid and metabolism is different. Everybody comes back to research, and of course you can't get grants for research until it's federally decriminalized and descheduled. So there really is a lot of different issues that have to be addressed. If you had to pick one issue that you'd like the federal government to move or remove, what would be the first thing, Beth?
Prohibition.
Just get rid of it.
Just deschedule cannabis. It should never have been scheduled. It was a kind of a placement issue under Nixon administration, and it got placed in Schedule 1, and there it stays. And so it has to be descheduled. And there have been attempts to schedule it as a 2 or a 3. That's not good for patients. It's a plant. Plant medicine's generally not scheduled.
Right.
And so it's a botanical. And as Dr. Ruby was saying, it's so important because I was listening to Dr. Steven Stein out of Florida, and he was talking about cloning. And he had 6 clones from one mother plant, and they were grown under different conditions, and they were all different from each other. So when you find out what works for you, the labeling is so important, because AC/DC or catatonic in Massachusetts, you're visiting your friends out in California and you figure I'll just buy my medicine in California. You go to buy ACDC, it's not the same thing that you're taking in Massachusetts. So you really need to know that information that's on the label in addition to the terpenes, because the terpene profile, I think, has a tremendous effect on how patients feel.
I was talking to Chief Science Officer at Alternative Compassion Solutions, a kid by the name of Chris Liska. You're smiling. Do you know Chris?
I don't, but I spent 3 hours in Salem yesterday going over the science and the chemistry and saying that in order to get rid of the stigma, we need to make sure that people know that this is safe. And to answer many of the other questions, if the product is safe, if you're getting what they say you're getting, then we can do appropriate science. There need to be double-blind crossover studies. There need to be epidemiologists involved. We have to get rid of the stigma. And it's a multiplicity of problems. Yes, descheduling is part of it. I am not sure whether it belongs in two or its own category. There have been some debates about that. Getting rid of the decriminalization is very important. Having the banks be able to lend money to the grow facilities and the dispensaries, and for people to be able to use insurance to be able to get this medication. So there are a lot of topics there. Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker are the people who know what they're talking about in Congress.
Good. We like that because one of them's running for president too.
I know that.
Right?
Very well.
Back to, I come to you with I'm going to give I happen to know that this story exists, and I mentioned Chris Liska because I'm friends with Alternative Compassion Services down in Bridgewater, and they had a young couple come to them with a 3-year-old child on the autistic spectrum that suffered from seizures and was not verbal. They brought in a recipe and that they had discovered online that worked, and they brought it in, and Chris created this product back in the old days of compounding medicine. So he's compounding using cannabis. Sure enough, the child now is taking it 6 months later. Seizures have ceased. He's becoming verbal. He's more, his behavior has calmed down. This doesn't surprise you, does it?
Not at all. I've had too many cases like this.
That's amazing to me. And is it easy for these people to come to a doctor? And I mean, how does that happen? You know, tell me. You're looking at me like I'm a...
Well, right now in Massachusetts, it's extraordinarily difficult.
Still?
Yes. Now, you can get your CBD.
Yep.
But you have to make sure your CBD is broad spectrum CBD.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking Charlotte's Web. We're talking Simpson's Oil.
Yep.
We're talking Haley's Hope, Palmetto Oil. We're talking a CBD that has a 0.3% THC and terpenoids.
Right.
You can do it that way without getting certified and getting a card through the Cannabis Control Commission. However, if you want to get the THC to be a higher percentage and more milligrams,
right,
you have to get the card. And the only way you're going to get the card is to find a pediatrician who will certify you.
As a caregiver?
As
a patient?
No, that person comes to me as a patient.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then has to see a second physician, which is an impediment. It is one thing to be safe. It is one thing to be regulated, but to be over-regulated and so safe that you become obstructionist, that's a problem.
And that's what's going on in Massachusetts.
That's what's going on.
That's not right. I don't like that.
And when we talk about these type of situations, what we're talking about is over and over and over again we see it work, and yet it gets harder and harder, and it's still harder for patients. It hasn't gotten easier. It hasn't gotten easier since I started in this business in 2012. It's just we have more dispensaries, we have better access points, we have more access points, but the patients still have to register, they still have to fill out the form, it has to go to the CCC, has to be issued to them, and then they can go into the dispensary, and then the fun begins where they're starting to pick their products that work for them. And what I was going to say too is that you today that starts on cannabis may not be you next year that is continuing on cannabis. So as cannabis changes and adapts, and your needs change and adapt, and your health changes and adapts, your needs for cannabis. So cannabis is a journey, and I was explaining this to a patient today. It's not just a one-time fits-all, go in, and it's a journey, and it's a journey of that patient, and that patient is always changing, and hopefully they're getting better, and things will change. So it's a very complex compound. And so we need to have a lot of freedom and a lot of leeway to work with physicians. And physicians have to be comfortable. There are about 289 recommending physicians for adults with 60,000 patients in the state of Massachusetts. So,
are we finding that the doctors are seeking out more information now? Do you find your peers wanting to know more about cannabis?
Not at all.
Wow. Woo! That scares me. And bothers me.
That bothers me a great deal.
Bothers me.
At the level of the Mass Medical Society, there has been so much, I will say, difficulty in getting the education out. Now, there is a education module that is available, and it will be announced sometime in July for Massachusetts physicians. It's called theanswerpage.com. That is where I got my initial information. It is run by 2 Harvard-educated physicians. It is excellent, it is unbiased, and it's authoritative. Israel asked for it. It is what is used in New York. New York asked them to put it together. Pennsylvania asked them to put it together. It is what is necessary. Physicians need to be more comfortable. They need to be educated. Right now, the patients know more than the doctors.
Right.
Doctors do not like that feeling. But if they don't like it, then they better study it.
They better do something about it, which is
correct.
Make the effort and learn. Because there's tons of information.
We have a resolution that right now is extraordinarily prohibitive. They were going to reaffirm it for 7 years against recreational marijuana, against medicinal marijuana. I'm part of the legislative committee, and I had them say no. Let's talk to the Cannabis Commission. Let's talk to the educators. I will say Marianne Bamba, who is now president of the Mass Medical Society, she and I need to have the discussion and bring in the appropriate parties so that we can educate the physicians, so we can get rid of the stigma. Safety is out there. The dispensaries are safe. The grow facilities are safe. It's easier to break into Fort Knox. You have to wear a hazmat suit when you go to these places.
That's right.
Sure.
It is so expensive to do this.
Yes.
And that's why the product is expensive, because of the regulations. However, with safety, with education, I hope the stigma will go away. Getting back to, this was cannabis was legal until 1939. And LaGuardia put out a report in 1942 that said this is a public health matter. This is not a science matter. And in 1972, Nixon had a Schaefer report which said this is a public health matter. This is not a science matter. The data is out there. We have so much more problems with alcohol, with tobacco, with guns, and with opioids. Money talks. And I'm afraid
dictates policy, too.
And it seems to dictate policy. And I think that if the government was truly out for the benefit of the people they govern, it's supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, not just the 0.5% who run Wall Street. So I may get some flack on that, but actually I support the people.
And I think that, and I champion that, and that's why everybody loves you, by the way, because everybody I mentioned that you're coming on the show.
Talk to my wife about that.
You know what? I got to tell you, what the two of you have gone through, and you're still together, is an awesome thing.
Yes, we are.
That's an awesome thing.
48 years.
Because parenting and a long relationship are the two toughest things you can do.
Absolutely.
On this earth. And to have a child go through the trauma that he went through, and the fact that you guys are still, I mean, God love you both.
My wife became a PhD in psychology to understand what the issues were dynamically with him. My daughter became an Ironman, dedicating her PhD in female endurance athletics to him.
Ironman, Hawaii Ironman?
She's been there.
Wow.
And we've been there.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Thank you. I have to talk about my family.
No, you should. Well, you should be. My goodness, you should be proud of your family. You guys have been great. I mean, this show is going to keep going, and you are always welcome into my studio in Wellesley at any time to come out and talk, especially if you need an audience, if you catch my drift. We'll be happy to share your thoughts and your opinions with those people as well. Beth, as always, thank you so much for coming in today as well. We're going to keep this show moving, and we have other guests to get to. I do know that we have that story about that young couple that went to Alternative Compassion Services. And Stephen Werther, who is the president there, is a childhood friend of mine. And he's going to give us that story as we go to a break. But for both of you, quickly, you have anything you'd like to plug? Anything else you would like to say before we say goodnight for now?
Patients need to be transparent with their physicians and say, please learn about cannabis. Learn about it through the answer page. Have the Mass Medical Society endorse this. We need to get it out there so that people feel safe and people feel educated.
That's what it's about. Beth, last plug?
My last plug is that I think the lack of available safe cannabis is the largest international health problem that we see right now. And I also feel that we are very comfortable in the United States with people being uncomfortable. And so those who suffer are very marginalized in this country. And we need, those of us that have a voice need to stand up for those that suffer and don't.
Well, I am more than willing to give you an opportunity to have that voice at any time on Pro Cannabis Media and on In the Weeds. Both of you, thank you so much for coming in at night on a Thursday night here in Quincy, and I appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to have
much.
more of this show coming up in just a little while. Don't go away.
Husband and wife come in, parents local to the Bridgewater area, not to Bridgewater necessarily, but local to the Bridgewater area, came in. Their 3-year-old son had a number of problems. It was on the autism spectrum, had seizures, and from all of these things, he was basically having seizures. He had been verbal and had become nonverbal, and had become quite agitated, and also had an eating disorder. And they came in. Their pediatrician, who does believe quite a bit in cannabis and has worked extensively with kids, basically told them what he wanted their child to be taking, and they had been unable to really find this sort of formulation at any of the dispensaries in Massachusetts, and they came in here, and we were able to make them something almost exactly what they were looking for, very close to what they were looking for. The long and short of it is that they gave this, it was mostly a very high CBD to very low THC ratio, but there was a ratio they were looking for. Anyway, the child has had nothing but great success, and the parents are completely thrilled. The child's seizures have virtually stopped. The child became less agitated and started talking again, and now, because for a long time they couldn't even eat with him at the table because he would get too agitated. Now he's eating with the family again. His appetite is up. He's become verbal again, and it's like a miracle, really. And when people say, well, you don't have any proof that this stuff works, well, for me, that's all the proof that I need to see that this medicine is helping this. We're helping this child.
with Eastern Security Safe, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president and co-founder of the Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at the Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hello, my name is Victor Jury, and I am with Stock and Beans, and we love Pro Cannabis Media.
My name is Amanda Ostrowitz. I'm the CEO and founder of Cannabis. We're big fans of Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Abby Schnibbe, the Vice President of Operations for Plymouth Harbor Group, joined here with my father and our Chief Operating Officer, Robert Schnibbe, and we love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
It says say thanks. I'm going to say thanks. Welcome back to a very special edition of In the Weeds, live from the Performer Radio and TV studios in Quincy, Massachusetts. I am Jimmy Young, the host of In the Weeds, and I'm very happy to welcome in Kurt Dalton, who is the Evergreen Buzz's managing director. He's the grand poobah of Cannabis.net. He's the man around the cannabis world. I'm so happy that we've connected and you were willing to come in again on a Thursday night and keep this thing going and wave the flag.
Any help that Cannabis.net can give you, James, we want to get you worldwide. Letterman, all the way.
I appreciate that. And we've had some great guests, doctors. Dr. Eric Ruby was here. Beth Dost was here. And, of course, Stephen Mandile as well. I mean, those guys are the legends of cannabis advocacy here in Massachusetts. And I think that you're a legend in the media world. I don't care what anybody says. Kurt, tell us a little bit about Cannabis.net and how the heck you found out about us, too, because, you know, the Facebook of weed is how you are branded now, right?
Yeah, so the URL became available about 4 years ago, and I got it at auction. And in a niche where you can't buy advertising, for those people that don't know, there's no advertising being bought through Google or Facebook or Instagram through traditional sources. We knew that this was going to be a traffic grab. You needed as much traffic as you could. So we set out to create a one-stop shop for cannabis where we do full mapping for dispensaries, lawyers, doctors, any type of cannabis business. Full social network, the Facebook of weed, where people can exchange stories, ask grow questions, put up pictures. We also have a full cannabis job board, knowing that cannabis jobs are going to be popular going forward. Full cannabis and CBD events page. You can search by your zip code, check things out. We do have a CBD store online as well.
Is it full spectrum CBD, as we just learned from the doctor? That's really the only kind of CBD that should be bought. Don't buy it at gas stations, people.
Yeah, exactly. So we deal with only providers that can give us lab results. And then we're able to use different products. And we try to create a place where people could compare products. So if you wanted tinctures or a salve, it wasn't just one brand. So we have, I think, 11 different companies in there with their products.
And interesting, Dr. Ruby mentioned it, Charlotte's Web. I take it every day now in a dropper, and it has gotten rid of the aches that I have in my hands. And it's interesting, when I run out of it, guess what? The ache comes back. So I go out and I got the liquid again. I was trying the pill form. The pill form didn't work. And again, this is what you have to do with this now. You have to experiment with yourself to see what products are going to work for you. And everybody and every body is different. And that is a challenge when you're dealing with a medicine, right?
Yeah, and so you're talking about the anti-inflammatory properties for arthritis.
Yep.
There's also a big difference between people that believe in whole plant medicine, the entourage effect, meaning you need a little more THC in there, to the people that say get their CBD from hemp, which have a very low component of THC and other cannabinoids.
Right.
So that you have to check as well, because some people will respond to a very low dose of THC, and other people will need a higher dose. And that's not to get stoned or high. It's literally part of the medicine.
This is the problem with this stigma, that everybody still like, oh, geez, I don't know if I don't want to, get crazy anymore. I understand there's more THC in it than Dr. Ruby said it. Read the labels. And he thinks that they have to actually improve their labeling of the medicine.
Yeah, there's a generation right now, and it's not their fault. It was the miseducation that came in the last 30 or 40 years that says as soon as you heard the word THC, people freak out. I don't want to get high. I don't want to get stoned. I don't want THC. Well, you actually need THC for some of the interactions in the body and for the CBD to be effective. You need sometimes more than 0.3%. So.
But you don't need 17% either. I mean, a 6 or a 7% THC component can be fine and not get you wasted either.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So a general edible dose, which would be THC going through the liver, which becomes a much stronger version of THC, is about 10 milligrams for an adult. That's a getting stoned dose. So if you're doing 3 to 5 milligrams, you may not even feel any psychoactive effect. You'll just feel a nice relaxation in the body. You'll get your arthritis or your pain in your knee or your hip to stop.
Right.
And you're not stoned or whacked out as you have been told for 50 years.
Or 62 years, if you will. One of the things we're going to try and do here, which we haven't done, of course, this is the first time we've been in this studio, so we're learning the different capabilities. It really is a good looking studio. Yep. We are getting some good feedback now, and again, I want to thank the people behind the scenes here, Mike Zotos, who runs this studio, Joyce Gerber, our executive producer, and Jason Wolf, former WEEI guy, now with Money Matters Radio and doing a few other things. They were able to figure out how best to get this going. But Facebook, we talk about media, right? And there's still this feeling that Facebook, they don't want anything having to do with cannabis. So the signal on Facebook's been bouncing around and they're pulling it down, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. All we're doing, we're not talking, by the way, here, Kurt, and you saw I talking to the doctors and the PhDs, right? I'm not sitting here talking about how to roll a joint. I'm not talking about which strain I like. I'm talking about medicine. I'm talking about the benefits that this can have for you, not the negatives. And yet, you still have companies like Facebook pulling it down because, it's controversial. We could get in trouble for that. Come on. Really? It's the 21st century.
It's a very fickle monitoring system between their AI, which is looking for keywords and probably through voice, to actual human monitors. So tonight, as a perfect example, we don't have bongs sitting here. We don't have dabs. We don't have smoke and vapor going. We're literally discussing it as if we were talking about the Celtics at WEI. And Facebook has taken this feed down at least 3 times.
Wow, that's crazy. But it's good though, because now I get to blog about it and get and again voice my opinion and put it out there. And this is why we founded Pro Cannabis Media, is we want to tell your stories, Kurt. We want to tell the stories of Dr. Eric Ruby, which was really holy moly, and Stephen Mandile and all that. And now do we have a phone, or we're going to make the phone call? We have the phone call. So is Morgan on the line? Morgan Fox is with us. Are you there, Morgan?
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
Wow, fantastic. First of all, thank you so much for actually taking the time out of your battle with the latest virus. I understand you're a little under the weather.
Oh, yeah. Little kids are a germ factory.
Yes, they are. And isn't parenting the toughest job you'll ever have, by the way?
That's for sure.
All right, so we're talking to Morgan Fox. He's with the NCIA as a media communications liaison. And Morgan, I got to tell you again, the NCIA, I've been so impressed with the organization, visiting Washington, D.C., seeing what the lobbyists do down there. There's a lot of movement. Can you give us an update on what happened even yesterday in the various workings of Congress?
Well, absolutely. Yesterday was really a groundbreaking moment in terms of cannabis policy reform, because it was the first time that the House Judiciary Committee, it was actually a subcommittee of that, but it was the first time that any subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee had actually considered the idea of cannabis policy reform on a large scale. And not only were all of the witnesses that were called, including by the Republicans, in favor of sweeping reforms, but not a single member of that committee actually spoke out against legalization. Some people were talking about concerns about traffic issues and about teen use, but all the witnesses there just effectively relayed the information that we all know is true, that legalizing cannabis does not contribute to these factors. And there was an excellent exploration into how we can end cannabis prohibition in a way that helps to address some of the damage that has been done by prohibition to marginalized communities and particularly people of color. And that's the first time that has ever happened in Congress. So it was a huge day.
So that's awesome, and congratulations for that. one of the things I'm reading about is that cannabis advocates are actually debating now, since the movement is happening and it's getting more and more powerful, sweeping. Do you go for the home run here? Do you go for federal decriminalization, federal legalization? I mean, what is the end game here?
Well, I think that it's important to realize that it's very unlikely that any sort of comprehensive change, whether it's a complete bill that respects states' rights and respects state cannabis laws, or a bill that completely removes cannabis from the Schedule of Controlled Substances, neither of those really stand any chance of passing this year. But we have a lot of momentum on the issue, and we've had more hearings about cannabis-related bills this year than in any year previously. So there's no reason for us not to push for the farthest-reaching reforms that we possibly can and see what we can get out of it in the next session.
You know, Barney Frank, when I interviewed him, he thought it would be a lot better if you guys would just take an easy win in the beginning, which is to open up the banks and get the Safe Banking Act, passed. But because of the momentum, you feel like, you know what, we got to put a few more amendments on here. We could get more than that. Is that what's been going on?
Well, not exactly, because the Safe Banking Act is a singular piece of legislation that addresses an existing problem, and it doesn't require any members of Congress to take a position one way or the other on legalization. It addresses the problem that lack of access to financial services in the cannabis industry is creating public safety problems, and it's also preventing small businesses and marginalized communities from getting into the industry. And that's something that can be very solved with this one piece of legislation in the Safe Banking Act. And that is also the piece of legislation that has the most support in Congress, bipartisan support across the board. And we're actually looking at the possibility of a hearing in the Senate in the next couple of weeks. So something like that is a small fix that could actually make people's lives better across the country in legal and medical states is something that we should absolutely pursue. When we're talking about larger legalization bills, the chances of something like that actually coming up for a vote is very unlikely this year. So we can support incremental change, absolutely, but we should be pushing for as much as we can.
Hey, Morgan, this is Kurt with Cannabis.net. I had a quick question. What about a presidential action who's facing re-election and may need some swing voters and to look like he's going with the people? Is there any real chance that Trump does something again
that could screw this up?
Well, oh no, I mean executive order. He wants to take credit for it. Could we see that during an election period to kind of win over voters, or is that just pie in the sky?
Well, I don't think that there's any sort of executive order that could end prohibition effectively. There certainly could be orders that would de facto allow things to move forward, but that's basically where we are now, because William Barr, the Attorney General, has said that he's not going to go after states that have decided to enact sensible cannabis policies. But until we have actual laws passed, that's still just at the whim of the Department of Justice or at the executive. And until we get Congress to act, there's really no reason for us to sit on our laurels. That being said, the president has said in the past that he would support the States Act, and I think that it's possible that we could push for even more. So who knows what could happen in the 2020 congressional session.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that it's cannabis that is reaching across the aisles, where you have both Republicans and Democrats agreeing that something has to be done in a positive way to decriminalize or legalize or open up the banks. I mean, it's a fascinating time to be in Washington, isn't it, Morgan?
Who would have thought that this once heavily contentious issue would now be low-hanging fruit for people that want to take a bite out of criminal justice?
It is amazing. It is amazing. Morgan, I know you, I said 5 minutes. I want to give you the 5 minutes. I thank you so much. I am going to see you in San Jose in a couple of weeks at the NCIA convention, correct?
Absolutely, and I encourage any of your listeners to come see the Cannabis Business Summit. It's in San Jose from July 22nd through 24th. We expect to have over 150 speakers, 450 exhibitors, and over 10,000 attendees. So if you're able to, please come out and you want to see the cutting edge of the cannabis industry and all aspects of it, including ancillary businesses. Highly recommend it.
Well, that's why I'm making the trip out there to Planet California, and I will be experiencing it, covering it, and I'm sure I'll get a few interviews. Right, Morgan?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Appreciate your time. Feel better.
Thank you very much.
Chicken
Thanks for having
soup, chicken soup, and hot tea.
And CBD.
And CBD, right. Thank you, Morgan. That was Morgan Fox. He's the media relations director out there at the NCIA. They do an amazing job. And I think they're even surprised at how much movement they're getting now. But I just worry about the climate. You brought up the presidential thing. I mean, everybody on the Democratic side is pretty much pro-cannabis. And the Republicans really, I think, they're trying to figure out, gee, you know, how do we make sure we stay in office? We have to do something with this legalization thing, right?
As Morgan said, it's become low-hanging fruit. It's got such popularity on both sides of the aisle. Obviously, Democrats, but even Republican states that are getting tax revenue from, medical cannabis, if not recreational, all want to take credit. So that's why I asked the question. I mean, being on the cannabis side, is there a little bit of a Hail Mary? Could Trump just walk out one day if he's neck and neck with a Democratic and say, here's the new deal, I'm signing it today? And he answered that question like, well, you never know, but don't count on it.
Right. That's right. I'm not counting on anything because you don't know which way the wind is going, which way his hair will blow. As you can tell, you know which way I lean anyway. So it is a fascinating time to be following this. Aren't you amazed? And your site, by the way, pretty much anything you want to learn about cannabis, you can find out on cannabis.net. You got to search for it, but you have tons of information there, don't you?
Yeah, we have about 3,000 articles up. So if you go to the blog news tab and just use the search bar, and one thing we do is we have very good medical writers, which was our first foray into content. But we also have some really good editorials that we just cover stuff that other people won't do, or give opinions other people don't want to take. So we will come out and say things and say, this is what we're seeing, and we don't like it, or this is what we do like, where other sites may just kind of recycle the press releases and such.
Gotcha. Hey, I think are we making another phone call, or do we have him? We have Dan McCarthy on the line? Awesome. I think you know this gentleman. Dan McCarthy, how are you?
Hello.
Welcome back to In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. It's Dan McCarthy. Is it okay to call you the former editor of Sensi Magazine and now current Cannapreneur?
Yes.
Good. How are you doing?
Well, yes, yeah, that's accurate. Very, very recently, former Sensi, the current issue of Sensi Boston. That's out now. The July issue is my last issue, and now I'm the new director of communications and sort of content overlord of Cannapreneur Partners, which is a Westboro, Mass-based cannabis holding company and entrepreneurial investment firm, connecting the right investors with the right cannabis entrepreneurs, kind of circling around for the sort of global 1% outliers and the real all-stars of people that have the right ideas that really, need the funding to take things going.
Absolutely. And Dan, I want to tell you, I not only did I enjoy meeting you and getting to know you as a person, but I really did respect your writing. I will admit I will miss it, but I think you're going to be doing writing for Cannapreneur too?
Yeah, I mean, so, obviously my background is as a journalist and, a content creator. So I'm basically doing a lot of what I did for Sensi and what I've been doing in freelance for everything from, Vice, Daily Beast, Boston Globe, FOMAG, whatever I've been actually contributing to, bringing all of that and sort of funneling that kinetic and sometimes manic energy I have all into this project and this company to really try and help get a lot of stuff off the ground, and I mean I'm just Jimmy, you know me, I've been a part of the industry for a long time, just in terms of covering it and being sort of flanked by activist circles and some of the more colorful cultural ebbs and flows that come along and some of the adventures that I've gotten into for storytelling, but I mean, with the content that we're kind of, if you check out CannapreneurPartners.com, it's kind of a mouthful. It's, Canna as in cannabis, CannapreneurPartners.com. There's a news tab where we're sort of experimenting and getting some good content up and getting some reactions from our CEO. The company has a lot of, deep background in financial services and wealth management and that sort of thing. They kind of reached out to me as sort of their arbiter or sort of the bridge and oracle into the macro and sometimes very micro green scene.
Gotcha. So we're talking with Dan McCarthy. Kirk Dalton is with us, obviously, Dan, from Cannabis.net. One of the things that Dr. Eric Ruby brought up that I found a little surprising, but I'm probably a little naive about this, is that the medical community is continuing to resist learning more about cannabis as a medicine. What do you think? Why do you think that? Why are they still resisting this?
Well, I mean, it really depends on your school of thought, right? It's like a lot of things. Cannabis, there's a great meme that goes around where it's like, it shows like a happy, goofy, borking little fat golden Labrador, right? Next to like a double scale size replica of like the American Werewolf, London Werewolf. And the meme is like what people think cannabis is and what it actually is. And I'll let you figure out which one the banner goes under. And that kind of overlays into a lot of different aspects about cannabis. In terms of the medical community, I mean, look, I in no way am a doctor. I definitely did not go through the rigors of which I'm aware of for medical training in medical school. What I will say is that there's a lot of learning to be done. There's a lot of research that, we're in the quagmire, right? Where for a long time it was like, well, there's no research, there's no findings, there's no data. Then it's like, well, why isn't there any federal research or data? We now, obviously because of its classification and schedule rating, a lot of those things are sort of in flux and seemingly on the precipice of moving into different stages that can open up everything from, federal-backed research, all the way up to banking services and everything else. Exactly why some aspects of the medical community have very sharp or completely contrarian and neo, if not post-prohibitionist attitudes. I mean, sometimes it boils down to the person. Sometimes it boils down to their perspective and their interpretation of science, their distillation of it. I mean, the medical community is, in theory, always going to be on the side of do no harm, right? I understand how sometimes I've encountered aspects of, the medical community that's cautiously optimistic. Very rarely have I personally interacted with the medical community that is completely oppositional. I know it's out there, though. In general, I think it really comes down to a multitude of factors. But, if you listen to one extreme side of the argument, you've got the real sort of conspiracy theorists that say, hey, there's no money in getting healthy. If you subscribe to that, great. I don't. I think it's a very gray zone, much like everything else about this unprecedented movement and unprecedented time in history as it regards to cannabis.
Hey, so Dan, we just talked with Morgan Fox of the NCIA down in Washington, D.C. And as you know, there's been incredible movement on the decriminalization, legalization, descheduling front down there in D.C. A lot of movement, a lot of now debates within the cannabis community about exactly what they can accomplish with this momentum. Do you think that they should be going for a single as opposed to a home run, if you don't mind the sports analogy?
That's about the extent of my understanding of sports analogies, unfortunately. And depending on what your listenership is or viewership is, hopefully that secret can pass by the way. But personally, if I was to boil it down into that kind of a dichotomy, I would hope for a home run, but it all depends on how you define that home run versus, how you're defining that single. Is the single, getting, moving the ball down the field a little more to extend your sports analogy, Mr. Young? Or is it, it is what could be considered that single, quote unquote, is that a major issue that in the larger context is but one issue, but maybe carries particular different cultural weight, right? Or cultural historical understanding of maybe the roots of a particular problem. Of course, this could be anything from social equity to social justice reform to extreme arguments of if there's one person in jail for low-level nonviolent cannabis possession, that are rotting in jail because of various factors. A lot of them, obviously, now that the research is out, rooted in race. Not to turn the conversation that way, but look, I mean, it's a reality. And at the end of the day, you really have to define what battles you want until we get to the point of federal deprohibition, right? Until actually full legalization happens, there are actually a lot of new arguments spiraling off. This is really a time to not be bored. Whatever side of the argument you fall on, this is one of those things that's really going and reaching a critical mass that finally it's, think about this, right? When I used to lecture at the Northeastern Institute of Cannabis in Natick, a vocational learning institution that was around for a few years here in Massachusetts, I used to talk about the fact that I love my mom dearly, but my mom is sort of reliably, 5 years behind the culture. And kind of like the opening of that movie Contact, where it just starts with a shot of the earth and the camera pans backwards. And as it goes farther and farther away, you're hearing the radio of the 70s and the 60s and the 50s and 40s and onward and so on. And I remember the first day that my mom asked about CBD and asked, hey, do you know anywhere I can get some cream? I might need some for my ankle. I read that it's kind of good. It's this new thing. First of all, I did I'm coming, Martha, kind of gripping my chest the day I was listening to this, and then realized that, wow, this is starting to penetrate to the point that if it's reaching that sort of stratosphere of the cultural kind of, tiptoeing into cannabis, and that means the ball is actually farther down the field than we think. Again, no disrespect to my mother, but that's a good metric, because a few years before that, if I even mentioned that I had a giant stinky sack of weed in my pocket, she might have had a heart attack. It was just one of those things.
Yeah, we're moving in that direction. I want to ask you about the media for a second here.
Sure.
And also the stupid behavior still of people who are trying to drive hundreds of pounds of weed over the border from state to state or Canada or wherever it is that they get this stuff and then bring it into Massachusetts. I mean, and of course the media has to cover stories like this, but is it to me, the blame is on the industry, because it's tough for the industry to police themselves when people are out there, on the illegal market trying to make a quick buck, and then they do something stupid and get pulled over and get arrested, and that's the lead story on the news.
Well, I mean, first of all, for the last, ever since Washington legalized medical, right? As soon as they came out of the gate, ever since then, cannabis has been a sexy headline. There is no greater place to catch the scum and villainy of your regional culture and society than on the evening local, affiliate, local news. And if anything in town, city, region was caught with some kind of, combination of don't need the details, can just picture it if the headline will just paint it right, kind of stories of, these horrible wanton gangs carting upwards of 3 ounces in a bag with a small glass pipe and a lighter across the border. My God, everybody's, forget it. It's going to weaken the resolve of our allies and make our children's heads cave in and feet fall off and so on. Then it would get up to, well, here's actual weight being moved. Of course, that's always going to be a sexy headline, right? Of course, that's going to get attention. Where is that now in terms, in sort of relation, or not reflection of not only where legalization is, but, many of the glaring issues. And I mean, while we're still dealing in these sort of like neo-tribalistic states' rights, which are great, and of course the recent bill and legislature discussing about enforcing the States Act and making sure there's no federal enforcement coming in, you're going to be dealing with the fact that there are very happy people, very angry people, and everything in between in the cannabis community. And if you've got people that have the means to make a buck that are doing this, I mean, it hasn't been stopped for the last 100 years, if not the last 50 years in pop culture. but also in how people have been tracking what's been going on. So when you're looking at it in terms of the media loves to latch onto, well, look at this giant bust, right? Everybody now, if you follow a particular strain of media or social media, eventually on something you follow, there's going to be that standard shot of X-town police force standing there with a few people, like, you know, in their gear with their hands behind their back with, like, sometimes large amounts of cannabis, you know, material and edibles and gummies and these other things, sometimes comically, ridiculously small busts and things that become their own sort of punchline and meme in the cesspool that is Twitter and social media at times. But there is movement, though, and what the media, I think, and hopefully can help push towards covering more is the fact that, you know, law enforcement are, in different ways and fits and starts, depending on where you're talking about, are kind of coming around. I mean, let's start way at the big top, right? You know, what was the announcement in California at LAX by TSA a couple months ago? They're like, look, okay, we're not going to, if you have weed in your bag and you're leaving here, a legal state, we don't care. Like, we're looking for bombs and knives and, you know, explosives and these things. Right. You know, we don't care. We can't say what's going to happen where you're going. We just don't care. So that's sort of, you know, one major flag in the sand. The other is that, you know, I mean, I was at the State House News Forum's panel on social equity and the need for, you know, sort of capital investment to get a lot of these entrepreneurs off the ground and how, you know, the social equity in Massachusetts can improve and these other things. It was a great panel the other week. And following that, there was, you know, sort of a discussion on, you know, talking about the existence or the sort of maintenance of where the black market is and how it's sort of shifting and ebbing and flowing based on the fits and starts of the different states doing different things in legalization. You know, and I think it was it Walpole Police Chief Carmichael?
Yes.
I think it was.
Yes, that's what it is.
Okay, so he was there, and I think he said it right on stage. He's like, look, you know, we're at a point where, you know, it was almost like, don't make us, you know, make a big thing about weed. Like, we're not coming for that. We're not spending the resources to go shake down somebody with, like, a quarter ounce of flour and a couple brownies in their pocket. Right. If there's some kind of major, obvious, illegal operation going on that is flagrantly violating not only the rules, but creating a potential safety hazard for a neighborhood or something with some, like, horrible grow or some, you know, I think he gave a couple stories about them getting calls to go check out, you know, butane explosions and these other things for people trying to make concentrates. But, I mean, if at the end of the day the media starts to pay more attention to the shifts and the grand sort of destigmata of cannabis, from everything from, you know, the generational shift and who's becoming the greatest users of cannabis. I mean, Jimmy, you're in there, or if you're not, you're about to get there. You know what I'm saying?
I am a baby boomer. I'll admit it. Okay.
I know, but I mean, the fact you took your first dabs on camera at the Boston Freedom Rally, you know what I mean? Like, you're definitely at the vanguard.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm other places too. Yeah, no. By the way, that's still one of the most viewed videos that we've ever produced. I just want to say.
I can't imagine why.
It was pretty funny. That's why.
It was great. And afterwards, man, you were bouncing off the bandstand talking to Patriots players and who was there? There's some old like quarterback from the Chicago Bears or something.
Jim McMahon with Dr. Uma. Dr. Uma and Jim McMahon. It's a great picture. Actually, it was part of our little sizzle reel that we had at the beginning of the show, and we'll show again at the end. But Dan McCarthy, as usual, when it comes time to actually fill time, I know exactly who to go to. And I appreciate you taking some time out on a Thursday night to talk to us. I want to get you in studio. I think we're going to come back to this studio again. I think we're going to be let back in the door. And I don't care whether Facebook carries us or not, to be honest, at this point. I don't.
No, I saw it. It was in my feed. It was floating around. You got a couple likes from me, that's for sure.
All right, well, that's good. Hey, you know what? Social media is a whole new world out there, like it is a whole new world of weed. So, Dan McCarthy, one more plug for Cannapreneurs, and how do they find out more about it?
Yeah, I mean, just check out CannapreneurPartners.com for anybody interested in sort of anything from, you know, a business consultation, but more importantly, looking into what Cannapreneur is doing in terms of, we've just launched a $150 million fundraise to break across all the different sectors of cannabis. We've got a investor wait list from months of sort of previewing what was coming with Cannapreneur. There's some success stories already in the pile in terms of both bringing projects to fruition as well as connecting investors and entrepreneurs, both local and national, with the right kind of partnerships and offering that sort of operational support. And I'll tell you what, man, they did the right thing and they brought me in, so we can just make this an entire homogenous family.
Well, we look forward to that. I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a tip about Trella Technologies. I don't know if you know this company, but
I do know Trella, yes.
Asia Nicole Atwood was in studio yesterday.
She's fantastic.
They're doing a crowdfunding initiative now. We actually may play one of their videos later on this program. But Dan McCarthy, Cannapreneur, always great to talk with you, and I look forward to talking with you again, and maybe we'll get you in studio the next time.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll talk soon.
All right, there goes Dan McCarthy. And I'll tell you, he's everywhere. You see him on New England Cable News. You see him on other places. I mean, he's really become a media personality for cannabis.
He's high energy, and for Massachusetts, where it's at with rec and opening. And, I mean, for the East Coast, we really are a leading state. It doesn't feel like it, but for the East Coast, like, this is where it's happening right now until New York gets their act together. So,
and you know what? That's going to be the ballot question in 2020. Yeah. Both New Jersey and New York, I think, are going to have it, and then it'll take another 2 years for the legislature to figure it out from there. But that's how this is working. It's a slow rollout. Speaking of rollouts, hey, Mike Zotos, we're going to take a break, and I have no idea what you're going to run, but I know it'll be interesting, and we're going to come back with more, and then take us home to at the top of the hour. So don't go away. In the Weeds from the Performer TV studios in Quincy continues after this.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. Why? Because we're a media company that is pro-cannabis. Pro-cannabis, because those stories are not being told. We are live streaming from events.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the live stream from the New England Cannabis Convention.
We are blogging on all topics. We are partners with Leafly, Weed Maps, Green Flower, MJ Headline News, Sensi Magazine, and The Weed Tube. We are Weekly News Dabs with Jimmy Young.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of News Dabs with Jimmy Young, now reporting for the Pro Cannabis Media Group and ProCannabisMedia.com.
From New Orleans, Liz Dameron, Pro Cannabis Media Network.
We are listing cannabis-friendly events. We are interviewing cannabis experts on the podcast In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. You were one of the co-authors of Question 4, which paved the way. First of all, how did you get picked for that honor, if you will?
We write laws, regulations, we advocate for them, and then we get licenses and we keep them compliant.
We are the Cannamom Show with Joyce Gerber.
A different way of understanding how cannabis impacts your body, which is very different from alcohol, which I think that's the big message that has to get out.
And also much less harmful.
Yeah, much less harmful.
We are a digital media company for the cannabis industry, telling their stories in their words.
It's nothing like having patients come back and say, I feel better.
I am confident that Congress is, at the very least in this current Congress, by next year, going to make it legal make it clearly legal for banks to take marijuana accounts, which is a big step forward.
I also teach cannabis law at my alma mater, Suffolk Law.
Oh, what?
She's just getting started.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. My goodness, this is crazy.
So then combining my background with chemistry and in microbiology, I really wanted to bring that data-informed science into my cannabis practice, and I started working actually at a few dispensaries in Massachusetts.
It's a whole new world of weed out there. I never thought I'd see the Red Sox win a World Series, let alone 3.
Yeah.
Okay? I never thought I'd see the Patriots win a Super Bowl, let alone 5. This is tape. Okay.
We are ProCannabisMedia.com. Subscribe today.
You know, when you read these factoids, Kurt Dalton's back on In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, that would be me, and we're here at the Performer TV studios in Quincy. When you read those factoids, the one about China, which I find very interesting, just because we were talking a little bit about how Western medicine fixes symptoms, Eastern medicine heals you. Right? Isn't that the biggest debate in medicine? And here it is, you know, evidence of the Chinese using this stuff for 3,000 years ago.
One of our writers wrote in, would you try North Korean weed as Trump was in the DMZ? And because North Korea is a huge hemp grower, huge marijuana grower, China as well. And, you know, if you had the opportunity, land-raised strains growing over there, kind of, you're not going to get it. Would you fire up some North Korean weed? And we got some great responses on it.
And I'm guessing that the overall attitude on that was, yes, we would fire it up.
Yeah, because of the scarcity of the land-raised strains, which is the stuff from the Middle East, and it's harder and harder to get with cloning and with all the kind of mixed porridge being created here in the States, that, yes, people would like, oh, there must be stuff that, like dinosaurs, you'd see like a T-Rex next to some plant. So
that's right. Hey, look, they're trying to bring the woolly mammoth back to help the climate change, right, in the Arctic. Isn't that? I think I saw 60 Minutes do that this week. Yep. By the way, still the best show on television. I mean, the best storytellers. I only aspire to try and tell stories of the cannabis industry as well as 60 Minutes tells their stories.
Absolutely, and you're doing it.
Well, we're giving it a shot, right?
Right.
That's the first step, right?
Right.
That is the first step. Now, wait. Now, here's the thing about what happens with Kurt and I. So we're sports fans, okay? And people who know my background at all know that I used to be a sports guy in Boston at New England Cable News, and up until like 2009, I had my own show in the 1990s, back when I had talent and ability. Anyway, so he told me something in the break. He just throws it out there that another major event happened in the NBA, during the time that I've been here on the show?
Literally during the break, Westbrook got traded. So I looked at Jimmy and I said, hey, Westbrook's on the Rockets. Go. Now, on the air. Go.
What? Russell went down. What happened? Chris Paul switched. What happened?
Chris Paul, a couple first-round picks. So Houston's got Harden and Westbrook. They're each going to take 45 shots a night and see what happens.
Is Danny Ainge's phone number still available?
First thing I thought of was Capella must be praying for a trade right now.
I mean, oh my goodness gracious. Well, anyway, I'm still bleeding green, and I'm still very happy that the Celtics have Kemba Walker, and I'm going to go out on a limb, since this is now live, and this will be a digital recording we'll have forever, that Gordon Hayward will come back and be an all-star this season.
That'd be great. Wow, all-star.
I'm going to make a prediction. He'll be in the all-star
That means
game.
He's getting a lot of minutes, so let's hope so.
Well, guess what? If his shot falls, he's going to get a lot of minutes, right?
That means Jaylen Brown will not be an all-star if Tatum's your other wing, so.
Exactly. Well, you know what? The nice thing, that's a nice thing to have as a coach, to have those kind of things. All right. We are talking about cannabis in Massachusetts. And by the way, the NBA, I believe, is the only professional league that has stopped testing for marijuana.
Yeah, the rest of them have to wait till the next CBA comes up, but they're pretty much all there. The NFL is ready to go too. Even Jerry and Robert Kraft support it. So.
Well, because I wrote to Robert Kraft in September and urged him to take the lead on this, and I don't know if he ever read the letter, but it was printed in Sensi magazine, and that was actually a big.
Get him on the next show. Let's have Robert come in.
You know what? It's
Quincy.
Funny.
It's not that far.
No, it's not that far. And the funny thing is, I used to work for him, you know. Yeah. I was the color analyst for the New England Revolution for the first 2 years.
If he fired you, he's not coming in.
He didn't fire me, okay? He didn't fire me. I got replaced by Seamus Mallon, who was the national color analyst at the time for the network. So I didn't, it wasn't like whatever. Look it up, folks.
Did he say, Jimmy, you have a great desk in the basement for you. Just keep going. A little further down.
That's right. That's right. I think it's pretty. It still was a great experience. And I was there at the beginning of MLS. I was there at the beginning of NECN. And we're at the beginning of Pro Cannabis Media now.
Yes, this is it.
So this is it. And there's Kurt Dalton, and I'm Jimmy Young, and this is In the Weeds. And just so you know, we produce a lot of content related to cannabis. I try to interview as many people from the cannabis industry as possible so that they can tell their own story in their own words. That's what we try to do at Pro Cannabis Media. You can go to our website, and even though this is being streamed on the Pro Cannabis Media YouTube channel, that's where we post a lot of our videos, our news videos. Please subscribe, share, like, all that social media stuff. I don't get it, but I just want to produce content and tell people's stories.
Yeah, and good content. It's so hard to get eyeballs with the current
social media restrictions, and even Google's Medic update 6 months ago just wiped out probably 10 or 15 cannabis sites that were up-and-comers, and they just went in and said, we don't want any more fake news. This is when the FDA was cracking down on what you could say about CBD.
Right.
So literally Google did a huge update, and cannabis sites got caught in it. It wasn't a cannabis update. It was, we don't want any bad information coming on our first couple pages, and cannabis sites just got thrown into that, got their domain authority knocked down, and major sites now are getting half the traffic just because you got caught in the whole, are you a legitimate medical journal telling the truth or telling things, or you just don't control where your content goes. As you say, you can create great content, but how do you get people to see it?
Right. Well, you know what? That's why we built this website. That's why we launched this company about a month ago, it feels like. And we've accomplished a lot in a very short period of time, and
Absolutely.
we look forward to the future. We're going to be developing an OTT channel, an over-the-top television channel.
Twitch, maybe, some other things, streaming, some other places.
I would like to, my vision, I'm going to go out here, okay? 24/7 cannabis news, information, education, and entertainment. Kind of like ESPN when it started in 1979, right? And you're going along for this ride, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the fact that you found out about what I was up to and wanted to somehow or other hang out with me.
Jimmy, I'm your Robin Quivers. Come on, man. Come on.
What is Robin? What is that? Who's Robin Quivers? I don't know who that is. I'm painfully unhip, so it's probably
that's
somebody.
Howard Stern's sidekick. Come on.
Thank you very much. Fair enough. You could do that. And that makes me Howard?
I'll be your Huckleberry. Don't worry.
Oh, my goodness gracious. That's kind of scary. That is kind of scary. Coming up, let's talk a little bit about what's coming up in the cannabis world over the next few weeks. I am heading out to San Jose to the NCIA's convention. I can't believe how big that's going to be. That's going to be crazy out there. But it'll be fun, and I know that I'll come back with more content because that's what I am. I'm a content creator, a content aggregator, similar to Cannabis.net. By the way, go back to what you said about your website. How many blogs did you have on your site?
We probably have about 3,000 articles up now, and I've had to edit every one of them. So as I like to say, I know a little about a lot.
That's good.
So I have to edit all those articles.
Sounds like my sports career.
Right.
All right. That's just enough to get by. That's what we want anyway. And you also, when we first talked, you said you had something like 1,500 videos under 2 minutes long, too, that were like little tips and little factoid things, right?
So what we did for each article, we created kind of a 90-second video that would talk about the article. So it would have text rolling across it. And that caught the eye of Cannabis Club TV, which runs in all the dispensaries. Because when you're sitting at a dispensary and you have 3 minutes to wait for your bud tender, it was a perfect music. If you didn't have to have the sound on. And then, of course, YouTube, as everyone has taken our channel down twice, as we found out. But it's just a way to create content. Always take your content and put it in other formats, which you guys are already doing. So.
Trying to do it in as many different formats as possible. And thank goodness for Joyce Gerber, who's helping me actually figure out, okay, where's this going? Who's doing this one? And we've got a great staff we're forming, and still looking for a really good salesperson, though. So if you're out there and you're looking for work, we can help you get some exciting opportunities.
We might have to put that on the Cannabis.net job board, Jimmy.
Yes, you can. You have my permission. We'll write up the responsibilities and the job description. Of course, you would have to work with me.
Right.
Just saying.
The other thing you mentioned, too, is the events. When we first started Cannabis.net, we might have had 10 events a weekend, that we would aggregate and put in a list for people. Literally, we have over 700 events coming up in the next 6 weeks. And the shows used to be, so for the listeners that don't know, MJ Business Daily, the one in Vegas, is the Super Bowl, because I get that at least once a week on the site. What show do I have to go to? Boom, that you have to. That's the Super Bowl. This year it's December 12th, about a month later in Vegas. But now it seems like even Boston. We have 4 now major shows. We went from NCAN to at least 4. And they're all taking hindsight.
CannaCon came in,
right.
NCIA, the Seat to Sale show.
Right.
There's a Cannabis show that was in Boston too, right?
And then they're also doing Worcester and Springfield. So just in our state, now granted we do have now rec approved, there's literally 6 or 8 shows just in our state.
Aren't you amazed, by the way, I talked about Asia Nicole Atwood for a second in Trella Technologies, and I think that we do have that video, and I think we are going to run that at the end of this show because she's doing crowdfunding. And I'm amazed at how many opportunities women have created for themselves. The Big Five is up there. So are you amazed at how women and entrepreneurs are trying to carve a niche in this new industry?
Well, it's so new. You just don't have those old boys clubs set up yet, and there isn't that history of just passing it along.
And yet the old boys club is, invading different states with their, with all their conglomerates and their verticals and all this stuff. You're seeing that, a couple of dispensaries have already been sold in Massachusetts, right? Yep. So it's happening. I tell you what, Kurt, I just want to thank you. Not only were you the last one here, but you're the first one to show up.
So always be early.
And I appreciate that. Well, I know where you were coming from, and
Right.
you knew where you were going, so the traffic in Boston is always crazy. I'm going to wrap this up, Mike, and I appreciate Mike Zodos, who's been on the board. Can you punch yourself up? You won't do it, will you? Ah, man. Okay.
Just turn that camera.
Anyway, great studio here.
Yeah.
We took it over, and we learned a lot this first time out, and we're going to just improve every time we make an appearance back here in Quincy. Thanking the people out in the hallway and the people who actually helped us get streaming properly. Dan French, Steve Helmuth, who we woke up. The kid is our regular director, technical director of our shows, but he's also a Fox 25 production assistant, and he does the overnight shift, so we woke him up at 7:30 tonight. But anyway, Nicole Spiller, who also contributed to this. Jason Wolf is out there. Joyce Gerber, our executive producer. Our whole team of Todd Ames and Byron Ress out there in Cyberland. Just want to thank you guys all for hanging in, believing in us, and we're just going to make it better and better and better. We're going to leave you with a couple of videos that we put together, and we'll close it out with the Trella Technologies pitch for crowdfunding, which I find fascinating, and perhaps you might find a crowdfunding initiative by Pro Cannabis Media soon. So for everybody here at the Performer Radio and TV studios, I'm your host of In the Weeds, Jimmy Young. Thank you so much for watching. Like us, share us, embrace us, and remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
Our product, the Trella Grow LST, gently and automatically trains plants to grow horizontally, allowing growers and farmers to grow tall plants in small spaces. The concept for the Trella Grow LST came from my own struggle as a medical marijuana patient to grow cannabis in my small basement. Standard manual solutions for maximizing plant growth make growing labor intensive. So, as an engineer, my mind naturally wanted to create a sustainable solution to grow not just my medicine, but food on a grander scale. We brainstormed pretty obsessively, then prototyped, built, prototyped, and built again Trella's unique plant training system. And along the way, we sought and applied input from experienced farmers and growers to bring us to where we are today with the Trella Grow LST. Our system helps indoor cultivators grow taller fruit-bearing crops, such as plants like tomatoes, hemp, cannabis sativa, and hops, in spaces with low ceilings or vertical and stacked arrangements, like those found in urban farms, freight containers, basements, grow tents, and closets. And now, you can get in on the ground floor as an investor with Trella Technologies. Our unique technology already has its foot in the door of the farming and cannabis industries in Massachusetts, which is a prime location because of its rich culture of innovation, its seasonal climate, and because of its regulated legal cannabis industry. In our laboratory testing, Trella has been shown to increase one cannabis plant's yield by more than 25% over traditional plant training methods like scrogging, topping, and sea of green. This is a huge advantage for the home grower with regulated plant count limits, but even more so for commercial cannabis growers who need to use their space efficiently to grow taller plants, such as mother plants that provide cuttings for propagation. Trella's automated system also helps commercial growers reduce their labor costs. We started sowing the seeds for Trella's success by joining key professional groups and trade associations, participating at trade shows, building a network of experienced growers to test our product, and getting the word out about Trella at different networking and industry events. In December of 2018, we introduced the Trella Virtual Reality Experience at a trade show, so both home growers and commercial cultivators could get a real feel for the Trella Grow LSD system's features and benefits.
So here's how it works. The first step is to simply place the seedling in the unit. Connect and sync to the Trella Grow LST app, then select the plant's growth parameters and let Trella take control of the plant. Once the plant matures to the flowering stage, Let it stretch towards the overhead lights by removing the top mesh panel. If you have heavy flowers or fruits, such as tomatoes, you can use Trella's flower support columns and attach the flower support grid as needed. Then harvest time is easy. Simply remove the side mesh panels, cut the plant at the main stem to harvest the whole plant or in pieces as preferred.
And throughout the grow process, the Trella Grow LST app tracks your growth rate and environmental conditions, so you have actual data that you can use to make adjustments or compare your results with future grows or other manual training methods. It really is that simple for the user. But we need your support to help to get more Trella units developed and into home and commercial grows across the globe. We hope you will be energized and motivated to help bring our automated plant training technology to urban and container farms in addition to cannabis cultivators. It's a unique time to get involved in a forward-thinking business that is developing technologies to support the vertical indoor farming industry, which is expected to reach $4.1 billion by next year. And global spending on cannabis is expected to reach $57 billion by 2027. We may even be on Mars by then. Trella is about so much more than food and cannabis. The technology we are developing has the capacity to be used in future endeavors, such as farming on NASA shuttles and other planets. This is only the beginning. Our team is growing and we have talented marketing and other professionals on deck to help make Trella an effective leader in the indoor farming technology sector. Please scroll down to learn more about our patent pending, never before seen innovation. And please join us as an early investor.